The impact that Cuban Americans have had in Florida is undeniable.
As a matter of fact, South Florida is known as Little Havana to the many Cubans who live there, for many reasons. For one, it has the largest concentration of Cubans outside of Cuba. The 2004 census shows that 68% of Cubans in the U.S. live in Florida. Not only that, but there are innumerable family connections between South Florida and Cuba. It all began during the time period of 1959 to 1969. During this time, approximately 500,000 Cubans reached the U.S., escaping the Cuban Revolution that had turned dictatorial. Then, during the time period between 1970 to 1980, the Johnson administration put Cuba in the back burner because of more pressing issues such as the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War. This made the Cubans in Florida realize they were going to be in the U.S. longer than previously expected. This sentiment became stronger when the situation in Cuba worsened and Cuba became a socialist country. At this point, Cubans decided to turn their attention inward, and they began their quest to accomplish the American dream. Some moved away from South Florida and began to head north in search of better jobs and more opportunities. They began to be looked at as a model minority because the ones that stayed in Florida began to start up new businesses and restarting the professions they left behind in Cuba. Notably, banking played a major role, as did law, medicine, accounting, and engineering. Meanwhile, many returned to school to complete their professional education. An important thing to keep in mind is that the Cuban American community almost always purchased their goods and services from within. Thanks to their motivated and slightly knit community, An important thing to keep in mind is that the Cuban American community almost always purchased their goods and services from within. Thanks to their motivated and tightly knit community, Miami was transformed from an insignificant southern town into a financially and culturally booming cosmopolitan. Then, during the years of 1981 to 1996, things began to change. The situation in Cuba kept on getting worse. All the efforts Cubans had made for political change in the island had been in vain. This is when they started to focus their attention inwards to American politics. More and more Cubans became naturalized citizens and registered to vote. An important contribution they made to the community came in the form of the Cuban American National Foundation, founded by Jorge Mascanosa, Carlos Salman, and Raul Masvidal. They lobbied against communism in Cuba, and it became a must to attend the CANF events and contribute money to its funds.